investigation has been launched after a French streamer died taking part in a live broadcast on the online platform Kick.
Planov is 46. He was tortured, beaten.
So yes, you heard that correctly. They bullied him to death on stream.
This is the saddest news story you're going to hear in gaming news this week.
Number 1. He streamed for 298 hours. By hour 297, his chest hiccuped once, and then forgot the trick. The autopsy would later say there was no traumatic injury, no single blow to point at, just a body that quit while the crowd typed emojis. This is the story of Jean Pormanov, and the room that just didn't stop. August 18th, 2025. The stream ends because a body does. Before that, it's a casino of noise. Donations chiming, chat bursting, a ring light flattening every contour into a bright, forgiving lie. He promises he can go forever. The room promises to pay for it. Both think that they're telling the truth. He's older than the format likes, which becomes part of the dare. The internet prefers the indestructible. Faces that heal between uploads. He arrives with mileage already on him and converts it into spectacle, grinding his fatigue down into applause. Viewers want a paradox, a man who can suffer without consequences. He tries to become it. He isn't alone. They call themselves friends, collaborators, co-hosts. Different words for the same arrangement. They instruct. He performs. Handles and nicknames, laughter sharpened into a tool. If the room quiets, they press harder. If the audience drifts, they offer it something to come back for. A slap disguised as banter. A dare wrapped in a grin. A punishment sold like a punchline you had to be there for. It wasn't a single stream. It was months of them. Reportedly, the rehearsals looked like comedy. Humiliation as a premise. Violence pitched as content. The body turned into an instrument that played pain on command. They discovered the economy of it. How sleep becomes currency. How hunger can be monetized. How shame can be recycled until it pays out like a slot machine. He tells the camera he's fine. He tells the room he's fine. He tells his bandwidth and lighting and microphones and a crowd large enough to drown any one voice that everything is fine. Fine becomes a performance choice, another filter on the lens. But the nervous system doesn't stream. The nervous system tallies. Night 1, he's wired, loud, all elbows and energy. Night 2, the edges start to fray. Night 3, the laughter has a rasp in it, as if someone had mixed gravel into his throat. Night 4, the room has a smell. Hot plastic, stale fabric, food that didn't survive the joke it served. The ring light's hum becomes a mosquito in the skull. The floor keeps the footprints of people who planned to leave and kept not doing it. By night 5, he moves like a marionette whose strings have stretched from use. His eyes have that glossy ringlet sheen, like someone poured milk into the corners and forgot to wipe it. He fumbles small tasks. Chat typecasts him as content. He trips. They clip the fall. He winces. They ask for an encore. The men with him, reportedly associates tied to a group called Les Locales, treat his slowing down as sabotage, as if exhaustion is him betraying the audience. They nudge him back into shape. A paintball welt to wake him up. Cold water like a reprimand. A push he's supposed to turn into slapstick. If he looks away too long, someone puts his face back where the camera can see it. He learns to breathe in the rhythm of donations. In with the chime, out with the robot voice reading someone's dare. Sleep becomes a power the room doesn't let him keep. He lies down. A hand lands. He sits up. He lies down. A shout lands. He sits up. He lies down. The crowd buys his insomnia, one microtransaction at a time. August 21st, 2025. The prosecutor's office. An autopsy is scheduled. Words like toxicology and medical cause begin to circulate. Officials confirm no traumatic injuries. That's its own kind of horror. It wasn't just one blow. It was everything else. Back on the timeline that led here, the degradation isn't hidden. Clips show what the platform allegedly promoted. The older man turned into a prop, the smaller man used as a punching bag. The room trained to laugh on cue. The content sold itself as a game. The body played it until the rules became the point. Day 7. He can barely speak. He smiles to keep the room from smelling fear. He drinks water that tastes like copper and lies about the taste. The chat splits into 2 congregations, one that demands bigger stunts, and one that whispers that this has all gone too far. Text isn't a hand, it can't dial. The whispers scroll past and are replaced by laughing skulls. Day 9. He's not awake so much as present. He holds a controller like a talisman, a proof-of-like relic for the eyes at home. The room itself is now hostile. Too warm, too loud, too bright. He scratches his sternum like he can coax the heart back into the beat. He looks at the ceiling a little longer each time, like a man remembering a prayer he forgot. There's a kind of violence that never raises its voice. It lives in duration. It lives in again. It lives in the same small act repeated until the body reclassifies it as weather. There, constant, intrusive, inescapable. He learns what that is. The audience learns with him. At some point, the room forgets there's a person inside the show and starts treating him like a setting. Day 10. He begins to miss. Little misses. Button, zipper, word. Laughter that comes late enough to read as an apology. He puts a hand on a doorframe longer than balance needs. The crowd sees the stumble and asks for another. You can always ask for more when the people on the other end of the demand can't hand the request back to you. Day 11. He lies down like a settlement with gravity. The chat debates whether this is a bit or not. The donation voice, bright, synthetic, helpful, reads a message noting he isn't moving. The room tests life with a toss. A plastic bottle, half full. It lands against his shoulder with a soft thud. No reaction. A palm cracks against his cheek. The sound lands and then keeps landing in the silence that follows. The lens, faithful animal that it is, does not blink. Time gets weird here. The stream is both fast and frozen. The chat panics and jokes at once, which is what panic looks like online. The men hesitate like people standing too close to a rail at the edge of a balcony. Someone says his name with the wrong kind of emphasis. Too much punctuation, not enough breath. If you're wondering what death sounds like in a room designed for noise, it sounds like efficiency. The absence of fidgeting, the natural silence of something that's finished. For the first time in 12 days, the room becomes honest. August 22nd, 2025. Officials stand in front of microphones. They say, no traumatic injuries. They say, medical or toxicological explanations under review. They say, the investigation will consider undue influence and abuse of weakness. More to come. They don't say, a crowd learned what quiet means the hard way. People asked who killed him, and the answer doesn't know how to be small. There are the men in the room, there is the room, there's the platform with its moderation that waits until the paperwork arrives. There is the audience, many thousand strong, that paid to keep him awake, and changed the subject when sleep started to look like a need instead of a punchline. There's the man himself, old enough to understand the bargain, desperate enough to pretend he could outlast it. In public, grief does what grief always does online. It rebrands. Cold clips become warm montages. The same crowd that posted skulls now posts candles. The same room that laughed posts lessons. It isn't hypocrisy, it's probably relief. The chance to pretend the story had a moral before it had an ending. August 26th, 2025. Prosecutors open an inquiry into the platform itself. Legal phrases line up like rows of teeth, knowingly broadcasting violent acts, compliance with safety obligations, reporting duties, platform liability under European law. Somewhere in the legal office, someone writes the number 49 million on a memo, the size of the possible fine, and underlines it twice. However, the facts are plain and harder to look at than any clause. He died during a stream that had been taught to use his body as a controller. He died after months of on-air abuse, documented and debated and monetized. He died without a cinematic wound, without a weapon to hold up for cameras, without an autopsy photo that could be censored on a morning show. He died the way you die in a place that calls suffering entertainment, incrementally with an audience. If you need a villain with a single face, the story disappoints you. If you need accountability with a single address, the story disappoints you. The horror is distributed. The brutality is efficiently crowdsourced. Think of 1,000 hands resting lightly on someone's chest. Each insists, this pressure can't hurt. The math knows better. The worst part isn't that the camera kept rolling. It's that the camera was the least cruel thing in the room. It told the truth. It held on. It didn't edit. It watched a man go still and refused to pretend he was performing. Everyone else kept pretending. A reflex, a defense, a marketing strategy. Years from now, someone will rewatch the last minutes. They'll try to time the exact second the room should have changed behavior. They'll look for the moment when content needed to say stop instead of more. They'll find dozens of those moments, and they'll all be earlier than feels comfortable. Jean didn't die off screen. He died where we could see him. He died exactly where we asked him to, inside the content. There's your horror. Not the slap, not the bottle, not the days. The horror is that we were there, and our being there is what mattered. He streamed for 298 hours. That number will be repeated like a trophy, like an achievement, like a warning. Officials will keep saying no traumatic injuries. Investigators will keep saying ongoing. The internet will keep doing what it does, finding a way to turn a horror into a square video with a caption that fits. Somewhere in there, a man will keep being dead, which doesn't trend, but endures. Remember this instead of a eulogy. In a world where attention is a god you have to feed, some altars are built out of people. We don't need more proof. We need to refuse to be the choir. Number 2. Late in August, multiple US campuses entered lockdown after a string of hoax active shooter calls. The calls came from an online swatting for hire group calling itself Purgatory. Operators gathered in a live voice room, delivered scripted threats in a steady cadence, and kept a tight audience listening while buildings changed shape. At points, there were roughly 40 listeners. The weapons and wounds were fake. The fear and the emergency response were real. Purgatory ran like a service. Handles rotated, room names changed, avatars shifted, but the workflow stayed the same. Calls hit crowded hours when a hallway could clog in seconds. Details were chosen to force immediate escalation. When hesitation appeared, a low concussive audio cue hit in the chest and shoved judgment toward worst case. It wasn't a gunshot. It behaved like one. On the first campus, alerts landed almost at once. Shelter in place. Secure doors. Stay silent. Ordinary rooms became barricades in under a minute. Chairs jammed under handles until wood popped. Desks scraped tile and left chalk on palms. Light stayed on because the click of a switch sounded too loud. Bodies packed into corners and stayed there. Voices died off and hand signals took over. Anyone in the hallway chose a door in one step and lived with it. The building's sound changed immediately. The hum of ballasts that never mattered cut through the room. Every footfall outside had to be judged. A cleaning cart hit a threshold and emptied lungs. Radios on the far side spat short codes. Messages to parents and friends sat on sending because the network was saturated. People switched to quiet mouth breathing. A phone's low battery chirp snapped 10 heads at once. A bottle rolled, tapped a chair leg, and everyone waited for the next sound. Hundreds of miles away, a cold monitor lit a desk covered in notes. A private researcher had tracked the group for days. A map marked recent targets. A timeline mapped active hours. A recorder captured the public side of the stream. There was no badge and no route into dispatch. The only leverage was speed. Call a campus while the incident was forming. State the pattern in plain terms. Ask administrators to verify internally before the last step. Sometimes the warning reached the right person in time. Sometimes it drowned in transfers while the building locked down without waiting. Inside Purgatory's room, the viewer count climbed and dropped by single digits. Voices stayed flat. Listeners saved short clips anyway. Red light sliding across glass, students flattening behind stacks, officers running past reflections they couldn't trust. When doubt crept into the call, the concussive cue returned, deeper and heavier. Compression didn't blunt it. It landed in the chest and moved hands. On the ground, the first campus finished lockdown quickly. Interior windows were covered with whatever was within reach. A projector went dark and a class shifted to the wall with fewer sightlines. A knee locked and wouldn't release. Teeth clicked without cold. Under a table, a student watched a text to a parent spin unsent as a hardcover slid from a desk and slapped tile. The group flinched and froze. A phone vibrated once again through a thigh and was pinned hard enough to leave a print. No one made a sound. The researcher held while a receptionist tried to route the call. Music designed for elevators ate 20 seconds at a time. A supervisor finally answered. The warning was stripped to bone. Live ring, matching details, verified twice before authorizing the most aggressive step. The line went on hold again. Somewhere else, keyboards went quiet and radios took over. The process moved, but the lie already had a head start. Purgatory shifted to the next target. A second campus in another state received a similar report within minutes. The choreography repeated with different props. Metal chairs instead of wood. Fire doors slammed and threw echoes up a concrete stairwell. A public address chime stalled twice before an announcement finished. In a restroom, a student locked a stall and stood on the toilet to keep shoes out of sight. Calves shook and rattled the partition. In a lecture hall, a spilled bottle crept toward a bag. No one touched it because the cap might click. A motion sensor door clicked in the corridor, and the room pressed itself flatter against the floor. Responders arrived in the posture the report required. Corners were taken fast. Commands compressed. The assumption favored worst case because the rule kept people alive when the danger is genuine. Purgatory depended on that rule. Every slammed door was a metric. Every siren was proof to people who would never face one. Outside a science building, a team lined a ram on a latch and waited for the count. The confirmation to hold arrived 3 seconds before the word to breach. The ram dropped. No one spoke. Everyone reset grip and kept the door in their sights. The researcher reached a higher-level administrator. The warning came cleaner, without extra language. The tone on the other end changed. Office noise faded. Radio checks replaced it. Verification moved through channels the researcher couldn't see. The question was whether confirmation would arrive before momentum hardened. A third indicator lit on the researcher's map. New region. Later hour. The room stayed quiet while reaction icons piled up. The third call didn't land as smoothly. A probing question from the receiver cut across the pattern and stalled it. The ring adjusted with more detail and another chest-level cue. Even some listeners flinched. The body had already filed the night as threat. On the ground, pace back down without relaxing. Posture shifted, tense, then a notch looser. Stand down began to move with a question mark that shortened as confirmations piled up. Teams reversed along their entry routes with the same attention they used going in. No one relaxed until the last hallway cleared. All clear never arrives like a switch. It comes in pieces. An official post goes live while a dozen rooms remain braced. A door at the end of the corridor opens a hand's width and stays there because nobody trusts the hinge. People stand and find legs partially numb from holding the same angle. A calf locks and refuses weight. A student leans over a bin and dry heaves until the room stops spinning. Fingers uncurl from table edges and leave half moons. A hallway that looked ordinary in the morning looks longer and thinner by afternoon. Purgatory did not stop because one attempt met resistance. Accounts rotated, banners changed. A private room appeared and disappeared. Chat posts bragged about demand without exposing anything. Core unchanged. Simulate, harvest, file, move. There were no bodies to count at the end of these nights. But the physical toll still had weight. Dispatch split attention until voices were hoarse. A medic treated an asthma attack outside a classroom. An officer's voice cracked from dehydration on the fourth sweep. Parents redialed into busy signals and watch screens refuse to send. Students slept in 90-minute segments and woke to phantom vibrations. Faculty learned which doors lied about their strength and which hinges screamed on the first inch of travel. Custodial staff wiped up spilled drinks, sweat, and sticky adrenaline residue. Someone threw out a pair of shoes after an accident they didn't want to discuss. Residue settled in ways no memo could clean. A student who never tracked exits began mapping them automatically. A professor scanned glass before taking attendance. A librarian added a second lock and felt exactly as exposed as before. The crack of a binder ring pulled breath from 10 chests at once. A parent stopped muting a phone at night and woke for every alert. Chargers stayed coiled by doors. The researcher stopped sleeping in whole pieces. Tabs reopened by reflex. Recordings were labeled and filed. Emails went to reporters and administrators who might have jurisdiction. Replies arrived at strange hours with cautious wording. Purgatory's accounts disappeared and reappeared with the same habits. The audience learned how to stay present and hard to trace. A storm knocked out power in a neighborhood and replaced the nightly hum with a heavy quiet. Someone woke to the absence and pictured the building anyway. When electricity returned, servers repopulated. Public rooms looked empty, then filled, then cleared. Deleted messages stacked like missing pages. An unlabeled private room sat for an hour and vanished. Morning on campus looked normal on purpose. Coffee lines formed. Syllabi were discussed in rooms that had been barricades the night before. An email arrived with precise phrasing. The word hoax appeared. It described method and didn't remove the effect. The effect was set. Hours on floors. Responders pulled across maps for nothing. A community taught how quickly a familiar building can turn against the people in it. Purgatory scaled by repetition and small adjustments. A location was tested. The delay between call and lockdown was measured. Details were altered for yield. A successful lockdown was counted as validation. A near miss became notes for the next run. After each night, response times were graphed against call scripts. Files were renamed and filed under wins. The audience stayed small, persistent, and better at hiding than the week before. Clips moved between disposable accounts. Security changed where no one else wanted to advertise it. Badges were checked harder. Doors gained weight without feeling reliable. Keys multiplied without guaranteeing access at the second it mattered. Students circulated unwritten rules. Don't sit with back to glass. Keep one hand free. Keep shoes on in the libraries. Avoid seats with limited sight lines. Rituals stuck. There was no single ending that felt like an ending. Sometimes investigators cut a branch off the network. An arrest scattered a group long enough for a new cluster to form. A name was dropped and the same behavior returned under different art. Imitators learned the leverage quickly. The rule that protects real people in real events stayed in force. Assume the worst until it's over. Purgatory's premise relied on the rule, and nothing about it was going to change. Time moved. The texture of the place did not return to what it had been. A flicker in a hallway froze a row of bodies. A shove against the door from the wrong side carved a silence that hurt. A cart squeal sent people into cover while the wheels cleared the corners. Corners were taken wider. Conversations stopped and started for no reason, and bodies stayed angled toward the doors. By the next term, the building was still the same building, but every part of it carried a different weight. The chair still fit under the handle, and everyone knew exactly how it felt to push. The seam of light under a door remained a seam of light, and eyes watched it as if it could thicken. The blower kicks on, and it sounds like movement where there shouldn't be any. Phones stayed in pockets. Chargers stayed by doors. A pen rolled off a desk, and a row of students flinched, laughed too loud, and checked the door anyway. Purgatory wasn't a monster to chase. It was a clock. A small room pressed a button. Buildings reshaped on cue. A file was saved, the name changed, and the schedule repeated. The stream ends, but the building remembers.